Hello, dear wanderer. Welcome back to the Midnight Explorer. Tonight, pull your blankets close. Dim the lights. Let the world outside fade into shadow. Because tonight, we're going on a journey, not through space, but through time. Not through kingdoms or empires alone, but through something far more intimate. Something that lives in your morning cup. Something that hums in your veins right now, perhaps, as you listen to these words. Tonight, we explore caffeine. But this isn't a story about chemistry, though chemistry will visit us. This isn't merely a tale of beans and leaves, though we'll walk through ancient forests and meet the hands that first plucked them. No, tonight we're tracing something deeper. We're following the human longing to stay awake, to push back against the heaviness of sleep, to remain just a little longer in the light. Caffeine is the world's most beloved drug. More than 3 billion cups of coffee are consumed every day. Tea even more. Chocolate, energy drinks, soft drinks, they all carry the same molecular whisper, the same ancient promise. You don't have to rest yet. Stay with us. Stay awake. But where did this promise begin? Who first tasted bitterness and found clarity? Who first felt their thoughts sharpen, their exhaustion lift, and wondered if they'd stumble upon magic? Come with me now. Let's walk back through the mist of centuries. Let's find the beginning. Close your eyes and imagine. The Ethiopian highlands, perhaps 1,000 years ago, maybe more. Time here is uncertain, wrapped in legend like morning mist clinging to mountains. The air's thin and cool. The sun hasn't fully risen yet. It's that soft gray moment before dawn when the world feels suspended between dreaming and waking. You can smell the earth damp from night dew, hear the distant call of birds beginning their first songs. And there, on a hillside covered with wild shrubs with dark green leaves and bright red berries, is a goatherd named Kaldi. Kaldi's young, perhaps 16 or 17. His face is weathered already by sun and wind, his hands rough from work. He's been tending goats since he was old enough to walk, following his father's footsteps and his father's father before him. It's the kind of work that becomes part of your bones. Wake before light, walk the hills, watch the animals, return at dusk, day after day, season after season. But this morning is different. Kaldi notices his goats behaving strangely. Usually they're calm, methodical grazers moving slowly from bush to bush, but today they're excited, almost frenzied. They're leaping, dancing, bleating with unusual energy. Their eyes are bright, alert, almost wild. He watches, confused, as they cluster around a particular shrub he's seen 1,000 times but never paid much attention to. They're eating the bright red berries, chomping them eagerly, and then leaping again as if filled with sudden joy. Curiosity overcomes caution. Kaldi approaches the shrub. He plucks one of the berries and examines it in his palm. It's smooth, glossy, about the size of his thumbnail. He brings it to his nose. A faint, unusual smell, earthy, slightly sweet. He hesitates. Then he places it in his mouth. The first taste is unremarkable, slightly sweet with a bitter undertone. The flesh is thin around the beans inside. He chews, swallows, plucks another, and another. And then time seems to shift. The heaviness he's carried every morning of his life, that weight of waking too early, of bones that ache, of eyes that want nothing more than to close again, it begins to lift. Not all at once, gradually, like fog burning off under sunlight. His thoughts, usually slow and plodding in these early hours, begin to move faster, clearer. The world around him sharpens, colors seem brighter, sounds more distinct. He feels his heart beating a little faster, his breath coming easier, his body filling with an energy he can't quite name. He feels awake, truly, fully awake, perhaps for the first time in his life. Now, we don't know if Kaldi was real. Most historians believe his story is legend, a tale told and retold, changing slightly with each telling until it became the creation myth of coffee itself. But legends exist for a reason. They carry truth even when facts are lost to time. Someone, somewhere in the ancient Ethiopian highlands, did discover coffee. Someone did first taste those berries and feel that transformation. Someone did stand on a hillside at dawn and experience the miracle of wakefulness arriving like an unexpected gift. And that discovery, that first taste, would eventually spread across the entire world. Caldy's story continues. Frightened and amazed by what he's experienced, he gathers a handful of berries and brings them to a nearby monastery. The monks there are learned men, holy men who spend their nights in prayer and their days in study. Imagine the monastery, stone walls thick and cool, narrow windows letting in shafts of dusty light, the smell of incense and old parchment. The monks live according to strict rhythms, prayers at specific hours, work, study, more prayer, sleep, and then waking in the deepest part of night for more prayer. This night prayer, it's one of their greatest challenges, to wake when your body screams for sleep, to rise in darkness and recite sacred words when every part of you wants only to sink back into unconsciousness. The abbot, the monastery's leader, listens to Caldy's story. His eyes are kind but tired, so tired, lines deep around them from years of broken sleep, of waking night after night to pray. He looks at the berries in his weathered palm. Perhaps he's skeptical, perhaps he's desperate, perhaps he's simply curious, the way all great discoveries require curiosity. He eats several berries. Then he waits. An hour later, during the midnight prayers, something remarkable happens. The abbot doesn't struggle to keep his eyes open. The words of prayer don't blur and fade. His mind remains clear, sharp, present. The drowsiness that usually descends like a heavy blanket simply doesn't come. He feels blessed, as if God has given him a gift, a way to remain vigilant, to give his full attention to prayer, even in the darkest hours. The other monks notice. They see their abbot's alertness, his clarity. Word spreads. Soon, all the monks are consuming the berries before night prayer. Some begin to experiment, crushing the berries, boiling them in water, discovering that the resulting dark liquid carries the same wakefulness, but stronger, more concentrated. They call it the devil's fruit at first. Some monks worry that anything providing such pleasure and energy must be sinful. But others argue, if it helps them pray, if it brings them closer to God, how can it be evil? Eventually, the second view wins. And so, in the quiet stone halls of Ethiopian monasteries, the first coffee culture begins. The first rituals, the first understanding that this wasn't just about staying awake, it was about community, about shared experience, about the sacred act of preparing and consuming something together. But what was actually happening in those monks' bodies? What was this mysterious energy? Let's pause the story for a moment and understand the molecule itself, the thing that would eventually be called caffeine. Chemically, caffeine is simple. Its molecular formula is C8H10N4O2. 8 carbons, 10 hydrogens, 4 nitrogens, 2 oxygens, arranged in a specific pattern that nature, in her infinite creativity, stumbled upon. It belongs to a family of compounds called methylxanthines. The name doesn't matter. What matters is this: caffeine is a plant's defense mechanism. Think about that. The coffee plant, the tea plant, the cacao plant, they didn't create caffeine for humans. They created it to protect themselves. Caffeine, in high enough concentrations, is toxic to insects. It paralyzes them, kills them, keeps them from destroying the plant's leaves and seeds. But humans, we're much larger. What poisons an insect only stimulates us. So what does caffeine actually do? In your brain, there's a molecule called adenosine. Throughout your day, as your neurons fire and work, adenosine gradually accumulates. It's like a gentle pressure building, a soft hand pressing down on your thoughts. Adenosine binds to specific receptors in your brain, and when it does, it sends a message: slow down, rest, sleep is coming. This is how your body naturally regulates wakefulness and sleep. Adenosine is the Sandman, quietly spreading drowsiness as the day wears on. But caffeine is almost the same shape as adenosine, similar enough that it can fit into those same receptors, but different enough that when it binds there, it doesn't activate them, it just occupies them. Imagine adenosine arriving at the door of its receptor, ready to deliver its message of tiredness, only to find caffeine already sitting there, refusing to move. The message never gets delivered. You don't feel tired. Not only that, with adenosine blocked, other neurotransmitters flow more freely. Dopamine, the pleasure molecule. Norepinephrine, the alertness molecule. Your neurons fire faster. Your thoughts quicken. Your mood lifts. You feel alive. Of course, the monks didn't know this. Neither did Caldi or anyone else for centuries. They only knew the feeling, the experience, the miracle of pushing back the darkness, both literal and metaphorical. Science would come later. Understanding would come later. First, there was only wonder. Now our story moves from the Ethiopian highlands, across mountains and deserts, over the Red Sea to the Arabian Peninsula. It's the 15th century. The Islamic world is experiencing a golden age of learning, trade, and culture. Scholars gather in great libraries. Merchants travel vast distances, bringing goods and ideas from one corner of the known world to another. And someone, perhaps a trader, perhaps a traveler, perhaps a pilgrim, brings coffee beans from Ethiopia to Yemen. In Yemen, in the port city of Mocha, yes, that mocha, the word we still use for chocolate-coffee combinations, something extraordinary happens. The Arabs don't just adopt coffee, they transform it, refine it, make it central to their culture. They begin to roast the beans, discovering that heat transforms the raw seeds into something far more complex and flavorful. The pale green beans turn brown, then dark brown, releasing oils and hundreds of aromatic compounds. The smell of roasting coffee, nutty, slightly sweet, deeply comforting, becomes a signature of Arabian cities. They grind the roasted beans into powder. They brew it in special pots called ibriks or sezves, narrow-topped vessels that concentrate the steam and aroma. They add spices, cardamom, cinnamon, sometimes saffron. They develop rituals around serving it, around the social act of sharing it. And they give it a name, kohwa, which becomes kaveh, which becomes coffee, which becomes coffee. And there, near the Grand Mosque, the world's first kahve khane, coffee house, opens its doors. It's a simple space, rugs on the floor, cushions for sitting, dim lamps hanging from the ceiling. The walls are covered with geometric patterns, beautiful in their mathematical precision. Smoke from incense and tobacco drifts through the air. Men gather here after prayers. They sit in circles, passing small cups of thick, strong coffee. The cups are tiny, just a few sips worth, but what powerful sips. The conversations that happen here, they're different from ordinary talk, sharper, more energetic. Ideas flow faster, debates grow more animated. The coffee doesn't just keep people awake, it seems to make their thoughts more nimble, their words more eloquent. Poets come here to compose verses. They drink cup after cup, feeling their minds race, their creativity sparked. Scholars come to discuss philosophy, mathematics, astronomy. Chess players set up boards and play match after match, their concentration heightened by the dark liquid. The coffee house becomes something new in human culture, a third place, not home, not work or mosque, but somewhere else. A social space dedicated to conversation, connection, and the life of the mind. This model will eventually spread everywhere coffee goes. The template for cafes, for coffee shops, for every Starbucks and independent roastery that exists today, it begins here, in these first kahve khanes in 16th century Arabia. But not everyone is pleased. Some religious authorities begin to worry. They see men spending hours in coffee houses, neglecting other duties. They hear the loud debates, the sometimes irreverent conversations. They notice that coffee produces an altered state, not like alcohol, but still a change in consciousness. In 1511, the governor of Mecca, Higher Beg, actually tries to ban coffee. He declares it an intoxicant, forbidden under Islamic law. He orders the coffee houses closed. He has bags of beans publicly burned in the streets. The ban lasts exactly 16 days. Why? Because even the Sultan in Cairo, Higher Beg's superior, is an avid coffee drinker. When news reaches him of the ban, he's outraged. He overturns it immediately and censures Higher Beg for his presumption. Coffee is too beloved, too embedded in the culture to be stopped. Similar bans are attempted in other times and places. In 1524, in Cairo itself, coffee houses are ordered closed because they're seen as gathering places for political dissent. The ban fails. In 1633, in Turkey, Sultan Murad IV makes coffee drinking punishable by death. People are sewn into leather bags and thrown into the Bosphorus. His ban also eventually fails. Why? Because you cannot easily suppress something that millions of people love, something that's woven into daily life, into social fabric, into the very rhythm of waking and working. Coffee is here to stay. For a long time, Arabia has a monopoly on coffee. They grow it in Yemen, they trade it throughout the Islamic world, but they guard it fiercely. All exported coffee beans are boiled or partially roasted to ensure they can't germinate. No living plants leave the country. The source of this precious commodity remains under their control. But monopolies, history teaches us, rarely last. Around 1600, an Indian pilgrim named Baba Budan travels to Mecca. While there, he tastes coffee and is entranced. He wants to bring it home, to share this gift with his own people. The story says he straps 7 coffee beans to his stomach, hiding them beneath his clothes. 7 seeds, smuggled past guards and officials. 7 seeds that can grow. When he returns to India, to the mountains of Karnataka, he plants these seeds in his garden. They take root, they grow, and from those 7 seeds, the entire Indian coffee industry eventually grows. Is the story true? Perhaps, perhaps not. But again, legends carry truth. Someone brought coffee to India. Someone broke the monopoly. And once coffee escaped Arabian control, it began to spread faster, farther, unstoppable as wind-borne seeds. The Dutch get coffee plants and establish plantations in Java, another word that becomes synonymous with coffee. The French get them to the Caribbean, the Portuguese to Brazil, the Spanish throughout their New World colonies. By the 18th century, coffee is growing in tropical regions around the globe. The plant itself is traveling, taking root in new soil, under new skies, tended by new hands. And with it, always comes the culture, the ritual, the promise of wakefulness. The first coffee to reach Europe arrives in Venice, probably in the late 1500s. Venice, the great trading city, where East meets West, where ships from everywhere dock and unload their exotic cargoes. Venetian merchants bring back bags of these strange beans from their trading posts in the Ottoman Empire. At first, coffee is expensive, exotic, consumed only by the wealthy. It is sold in pharmacies as a medicine. People believe it can cure all sorts of ailments, headaches, lethargy, digestive problems. But some Catholic clergy are suspicious. This is a Muslim drink, after all. It comes from the infidel lands. Some call it the bitter invention of Satan, meant to replace wine, which is blessed in Christian communion. The debate reaches Pope Clement VIII. Advisors urge him to ban this Muslim drink from Christian lands. But the Pope, so the story goes, decides to taste it first before pronouncing judgment. Imagine him in his papal chambers, the ornate cup placed before him, the dark liquid steaming. He lifts it to his lips, sips, considers, and then he smiles. "This Satan's drink is so delicious," he reportedly says, "it would be a pity to let the infidels have exclusive use of it. We shall fool Satan by baptizing it." Whether he actually said this, we don't know, but coffee is permitted in Christian Europe, and once permitted, it flourishes. These aren't like the tea rooms that will come later, genteel, quiet, refined. No, London's coffee houses are loud, raucous, democratic. Anyone who can afford the 1-penny entrance fee can enter. Once inside, you sit wherever there's space. Noble next to merchant, next to tradesman. Rank and social class fade, at least slightly, in the egalitarian atmosphere of the coffee house. Each coffee house develops its own character, its own clientele. Lloyd's Coffee House attracts ship's captains and merchants interested in maritime insurance. It will eventually become Lloyd's of London, the great insurance market.
The Grecian is favored by scientists and philosophers. Will's Coffee House is the meeting place for poets and playwrights. In these spaces, fueled by caffeine, ideas circulate. Newspapers begin to appear. Coffee houses are where people go to read them, to discuss the news. The Royal Society, England's great scientific institution, effectively begins in coffee houses, where natural philosophers meet to share observations and theories. Isaac Newton frequents coffee houses, Christopher Wren, Edmund Halley. Samuel Pepys writes in his diary about spending entire days going from one coffee house to another, gathering news, conducting business, arguing philosophy. The atmosphere is electric. Think about it. You have all these minds, sharpened by caffeine, gathered in close quarters, talking, debating, challenging each other. No wonder so many ideas are born here. No wonder coffee houses become known as penny universities. For 1 penny, you can sit and absorb more education than in any formal school. Women, sadly, are generally excluded. Some coffee houses admit them, but most don't. This is men's space, reflecting the gender inequalities of the time. Women will have to wait for their own coffee culture, which will eventually develop around tea rooms, and later around modern cafes. But for the men who gather here, coffee houses represent something radical, a space where your worth isn't determined by your birth, but by the quality of your ideas, the sharpness of your wit, the persuasiveness of your arguments. This is the Enlightenment, brewing cup by cup.
In Paris, coffee culture takes a different form. More refined, perhaps, more consciously artistic. The first Parisian café opens in 1686, Café Procope, which still exists today, now a restaurant, but for centuries the beating heart of French intellectual life. Picture it in 1750, tall windows overlooking the street, marble-topped tables, chandeliers casting warm light, the air thick with tobacco smoke and passionate conversation. Waiters in white aprons navigating between packed tables, carrying trays of small, strong coffees. And at these tables, Voltaire, who supposedly drank 40 to 50 cups of coffee a day, mixed with chocolate to temper the bitterness. Rousseau penning his revolutionary ideas. Diderot working on the encyclopedia. Later during the Revolution, Robespierre and Danton arguing about the fate of France. The café becomes the soul of Paris, not just a place to drink coffee, but a way of life. The art of sitting for hours over a single cup, watching the world pass by, thinking, writing, conversing. This is different from London's energetic coffee houses. The French tradition is more contemplative, more aesthetic. It's about savoring the moment, the pleasure of good company and good conversation, the luxury of time. Both traditions, the English and the French, will influence how coffee culture develops around the world. The quick, functional approach versus the leisurely, social one. We see both reflected even now, the American grab-and-go coffee culture versus the European tradition of sitting in cafes. But wait, before we continue with coffee's journey, we must tell another story. Running parallel to coffee, sometimes intersecting, sometimes diverging, the story of tea. Because tea, of course, also contains caffeine, and tea's story is older, much older. Let's travel now, not to Ethiopia or Arabia, but to China, not to the 15th century, but to the very mists of antiquity. Chinese legend tells of Emperor Shen Nong, the divine farmer, who ruled around 2737 BCE. He was wise, curious, a patron of agriculture and medicine. He had decreed that all drinking water should be boiled for health, a remarkably advanced understanding for that era. One day, so the story goes, he was resting in his garden while his servants boiled water. A light breeze stirred the trees, and from a nearby wild tea tree, several leaves detached and drifted down, landing precisely in the pot of boiling water. The water turned a pale green, a subtle aroma arose. The emperor, curious as always, tasted it, and he found it refreshing, restorative. He felt a gentle clarity spreading through his mind, a soft energy filling his limbs. He had discovered tea. Again, this is legend, but again, legends tell us something true. Someone, somewhere in ancient China, did discover that certain leaves, when steeped in hot water, produced a beverage that was both pleasant to drink and somehow invigorating. Tea cultivation begins in China at least 3,000 years ago, maybe more. At first, it is primarily medicinal, prescribed for alertness, digestion, various ailments. But gradually, over centuries, it becomes something more: a daily pleasure, a social custom, or an art form. By the Tang Dynasty, tea culture is flourishing. Lu Yu writes The Classic of Tea, the first comprehensive treatise on tea: how to grow it, harvest it, prepare it, serve it. Different regions develop different styles: green tea, white tea, eventually oolong and black tea. Tea preparation becomes ritualized. Special vessels are used. Water must be the right temperature. Leaves must steep for precisely the right time. The act of making tea becomes a meditation, a practice of mindfulness. The Japanese will later take this even further, developing the tea ceremony, Chano-yu, or the way of tea, where preparing and serving tea becomes a spiritual practice. Every gesture deliberate and meaningful, every movement expressing harmony, respect, purity, and tranquility. But that's not just ritual for its own sake. There is something about tea, or rather about caffeine delivered through tea, that lends itself to contemplation. Tea contains caffeine, yes, but also an amino acid called L-theanine. L-theanine is found almost nowhere else in nature in significant quantities, and it has a remarkable property. It promotes relaxation without drowsiness. It increases alpha waves in the brain, the waves associated with calm alertness. So when you drink tea, you get caffeine stimulation combined with L-theanine's calming effect. The result is focus without jitters, energy without anxiety, a state that Zen Buddhist monks discovered was perfect for meditation, alert enough to avoid drowsiness, calm enough to avoid distraction. This is why tea became the beverage of meditation, of scholarship, of philosophy. While coffee makes your heart race and your thoughts fly, tea gently lifts you into a state of clear, peaceful awareness. Two different plants, two different experiences, both carrying caffeine, both offering, in their own ways, the gift of wakefulness. Tea remains confined to Asia for thousands of years, but in the 17th century, European traders, particularly the Dutch and Portuguese, begin bringing it back from their voyages. At first, it is phenomenally expensive. Only the very wealthy can afford it. But gradually, as trade expands, prices drop. In England, tea finds its most devoted converts outside Asia. Catherine of Braganza, Portuguese princess who marries King Charles II in 1662, brings the tea-drinking habit to the English court. It's fashionable, exotic, refined. The upper classes adopt it enthusiastically. Over the next century, tea drinking spreads through all levels of English society. By the mid-1700s, England is a tea-drinking nation. Coffee, which had been dominant earlier, fades in popularity. Tea becomes part of English identity. The tradition of afternoon tea develops, that peculiarly English custom of stopping work around 4 p.m. for tea and light refreshments. It is credited to Anna, Duchess of Bedford, who in the 1840s found herself hungry in the long stretch between lunch and dinner and began inviting friends to join her for tea and cakes. The tradition spreads. Soon the whole nation is stopping for tea. Tea time becomes sacred. Wars might rage, empires might crumble, but at 4 p.m., the English have their tea. This dependence on tea will have enormous historical consequences. England's demand for tea will drive the triangular trade that brings opium to China, which will lead to the Opium Wars, which will reshape the balance of power in Asia. The American colonies' resistance to the British tea tax will contribute to the American Revolution. Remember the Boston Tea Party? All because of caffeine, all because of humanity's hunger for wakefulness. We must pause here and acknowledge something painful, because coffee's spread around the world is not just a story of discovery and pleasure. It's also a story of exploitation, suffering, and cruelty. Coffee grows best in tropical highlands, but Europe has no such regions, so European powers establish plantations in their colonies, the Caribbean, Central and South America, parts of Africa and Asia. And who will work these plantations? Who will clear the land, plant the seedlings, harvest the ripe cherries under the brutal sun? Enslaved people. The great coffee plantations of Brazil, Haiti, Jamaica, they're built on the forced labor of millions of Africans, torn from their homes, transported across the ocean in horrific conditions, worked to exhaustion and death. In Haiti, coffee plantations are so brutal that the average enslaved person survives only a few years. But there are always more people to kidnap, more lives to destroy. The coffee keeps flowing. European coffee houses keep serving it. No one thinks, or perhaps no one wants to think, about the human cost. Sugar, too, often added to coffee, comes from slave labor. The phrase white gold refers to sugar, and it is stained with blood. This is the shadow side of the global caffeine trade. This is what happens when human desire for a commodity meets the capacity for dehumanization. The Haitian Revolution begins partly on coffee plantations. Enslaved people rise up, fight a decade-long war, and win their freedom, the only successful slave revolt in history. But the cost is immense. Haiti's economy is destroyed, and the nation still bears the scars. Brazil, the world's largest coffee producer, doesn't abolish slavery until 1888, the last nation in the Western Hemisphere to do so. Even after formal slavery ends, exploitation continues. Sharecropping systems that are slavery in all but name, company stores that keep workers perpetually in debt, child labor, dangerous conditions, starvation wages. Much of this continues today. Most coffee is grown by small farmers in developing nations who receive a tiny fraction of what consumers pay for their cups. Fair trade and direct trade movements try to address this, but the fundamental inequality remains. When we drink coffee, we're part of this system. That is not meant to induce guilt so much as awareness. The cup in your hand connects you to farmers you'll never meet, to histories of colonialism and resistance, to ongoing struggles for justice and fair compensation. Every sip carries history, both beautiful and terrible. Cacao, the source of chocolate and our third major source of dietary caffeine, has its own complex story. In Mesoamerica, the Aztec and Maya peoples cultivated cacao. They made it into a beverage, often spiced and sometimes mixed with chili peppers. It was bitter, frothy, prestigious, drunk by nobles and warriors. The Aztecs believed cacao was a gift from Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god. Cacao beans were valuable enough to be used as currency. A rabbit might cost 10 beans. A slave, yes, pre-Columbian societies also practiced slavery, might cost 100 beans. When Spanish conquistadors arrive in the early 1500s, they encounter this strange beverage. At first, they hate it, too bitter, too unusual, but gradually they acquire the taste, especially when they start adding sugar. They bring cacao back to Spain. From there, it spreads through Europe, becoming chocolate mixed with milk and sugar, transformed into something sweet rather than bitter. Like coffee and tea, chocolate becomes a fashionable drink among the European elite. Chocolate houses open in London, rivaling coffee houses. Marie Antoinette has her own chocolatier at Versailles. But again, the production is built on exploitation. Cacao plantations in South America rely on forced labor. The conditions are brutal: clearing jungle, planting, harvesting the pods, fermenting the beans. This pattern repeats in Africa when cacao cultivation spreads there in the 19th and 20th centuries. Even today, much of the world's chocolate comes from West Africa, where child labor is common, and many cocoa farmers have never even tasted chocolate.
The caffeine in chocolate is less than in coffee or tea. A typical chocolate bar contains about 20 to 30 milligrams compared to 80 to 100 milligrams in a cup of coffee. But it is present, along with another stimulant called theobromine, which is why chocolate can make you feel energized and happy, and why it is toxic to dogs who cannot metabolize theobromine. 3 plants, 3 continents, 3 different paths to human discovery, all offering caffeine, all entangled with human history at its best and worst.
The 19th century brings enormous changes. The Industrial Revolution transforms human life. Factories rise, cities swell with workers, machines run on shifts, demanding human attendance at all hours, and caffeine becomes essential. Factory work is exhausting, repetitive, mind-numbing. Workers stand at machines for 12, 14, 16 hours a day. Children as young as 6 work in mills and mines. Everyone is perpetually exhausted, but they must stay alert. A moment of drowsiness around the machinery can mean lost fingers, lost hands, lost lives. So workers drink tea, coffee, anything with caffeine. Employers sometimes provide it, understanding that caffeinated workers are more productive, make fewer mistakes, can work longer hours. In England, tea becomes the working person's beverage. Cheap black tea, heavily sugared for energy, often with milk. The tea break becomes an institution, a brief pause in the relentless workday to restore alertness. In America, coffee dominates. It's cheaper, stronger, more available. The coffee break enters American culture. Diners and cafeterias serve coffee around the clock for shift workers. Coffee also becomes part of military culture. Soldiers need to stay awake on watch, to march long distances, to fight despite exhaustion. The term cup of joe possibly comes from Josephus Daniels, a U.S. Secretary of the Navy who banned alcohol on ships in 1914. Coffee became the strongest drink available, hence joe. But let's think about what's happening here, beneath the surface. Caffeine is allowing industrial capitalism to extract more labor from human bodies. It's masking exhaustion, enabling people to work beyond their natural limits. In a sense, caffeine is lubricating the machinery of modernity, not just the literal machines, but the economic and social machines that run on human effort. Without caffeine, the pace of industrialization might have been slower. Workers might have resisted longer hours. The efficiency gains that drove economic growth might not have been possible. This is not to say caffeine's bad, but it's to recognize that caffeine is not neutral. It has effects on societies, on economies, on how humans relate to work and rest. In 1819, a German chemist named Friedlieb Ferdinand Runge successfully isolates caffeine in pure form. He extracts it from coffee beans, producing white, needle-like crystals. For the first time, humans can see caffeine, touch it, measure it precisely. This is part of a broader trend in 19th century chemistry, the isolation of active compounds from plants. Morphine from poppies, quinine from cinchona bark, cocaine from coca leaves. Scientists are unlocking the molecules responsible for plants' effects. Once isolated, caffeine can be studied systematically. Scientists discover its molecular structure. They begin to understand how it works, though the full mechanism won't be understood until the late 20th century. They measure its effects on the body: increased heart rate, elevated blood pressure, faster reaction times, improved endurance. Pharmaceutical companies begin adding pure caffeine to medicines. Headache powders containing caffeine, aspirin, and other drugs become popular. Caffeine helps the pain relievers work better and faster. Tonics and nerve tonics promise energy and vitality, often achieving it through undisclosed amounts of caffeine. By the early 20th century, chemists have learned to synthesize caffeine artificially. No longer dependent on extracting it from plants, manufacturers can produce unlimited quantities. This paves the way for the next revolution in caffeine consumption: energy drinks, caffeinated soft drinks, pills and supplements. Caffeine divorced from coffee, tea, and chocolate. Pure stimulation in convenient forms. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. First, there is a war to fight.
World War I and World War II are fought on coffee and tea. Soldiers in trenches, exhausted beyond measure, stay alert through endless cups of strong coffee or tea. Instant coffee, first developed in 1890 but perfected during World War I, becomes a staple of American soldiers' rations. It's quick to prepare, does not require careful brewing, and keeps longer than ground coffee. The brand Maxwell House provides coffee to U.S. troops. So does a new product from Nestle called Nescafé, introduced in 1938. Instant coffee isn't delicious. Most soldiers tolerate rather than enjoy it, but it works. It provides the caffeine they need. In World War II, both sides rely on caffeine. Germans drink ersatz coffee, substitute coffee made from roasted grains and other things when supply lines are cut. British soldiers receive tea rations. American GIs get instant coffee and cigarettes. There's a reason these two substances, caffeine and nicotine, are bundled together in rations. Both are drugs that increase alertness and focus. Both help soldiers cope with extreme stress. Both, in their own ways, are essential to the war effort. After World War II, returning American soldiers have developed a deep coffee habit. They want coffee at home like they had, or tried to have, in the service. This drives the expansion of American coffee culture. Diners multiply. Coffee percolators become standard in American kitchens. The image of a pot of coffee always on, always ready becomes part of American domestic life. By the 1950s, coffee consumption in America reaches its historical peak. The average American is drinking about 3 cups a day. Coffee is marketed as part of the good life. Juan Valdez and his mule represent Colombian coffee. Mrs. Olson dispenses coffee wisdom in Folgers commercials. The best part of waking up is Folgers in your cup. But something else is brewing too. A new way of thinking about coffee and about caffeine is about to emerge. To truly understand caffeine, we must first understand what it's fighting against: sleep. For most of human history, sleep was mysterious. Why do we sleep? The question seems simple, but the answer eluded scientists for millennia. Aristotle thought sleep was the result of vapors rising from the stomach. Medieval physicians believed it was caused by cold, humid humors affecting the brain. Others thought the brain simply ran out of some vital force that needed to be regenerated. Only in the 20th century do scientists begin to unravel sleep's true nature. In the 1920s, German psychiatrist Hans Berger invents the electroencephalogram, which measures electrical activity in the brain. He discovers that sleeping brains don't just turn off, they show distinct patterns of activity, different from waking patterns, but still complex and organized. In 1953, Eugene Aserinsky and Nathaniel Kleitman at the University of Chicago discover REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, a stage where the brain is highly active, similar to waking, and where most vivid dreaming occurs. Gradually, scientists map the architecture of sleep, the stages, the cycles, the changes in brain chemistry that occur throughout the night. And they discover adenosine. Throughout the day, as neurons work, they break down ATP, adenosine triphosphate, the molecule that stores energy. One of the byproducts is adenosine. It accumulates gradually, like sand settling in an hourglass. Adenosine binds to receptors throughout the brain. When enough receptors are occupied, you feel tired. Sleep pressure builds. Eventually, it becomes overwhelming. You sleep. During sleep, adenosine is cleared away. Like housekeeping, the brain tidies itself. By morning, adenosine levels are low again. You wake refreshed. This is the natural cycle. Work, accumulate adenosine, feel tired, sleep, clear adenosine, wake, day after day, as fundamental as breathing. Except when you introduce caffeine.
Remember, caffeine's molecular shape is similar enough to adenosine that it fits into adenosine receptors, but it does not activate them. It just sits there, blocking them. Imagine a lock, the receptor, and a key, adenosine. The key fits perfectly, turns, opens the lock. But caffeine is like a broken key that fits into the lock but won't turn. And as long as it's stuck in there, the real key can't get in. So adenosine keeps accumulating throughout your day, but it can't deliver its message. The receptors are occupied. You don't feel tired. Caffeine's half-life, the time it takes for your body to eliminate half of it, is about 5-6 hours for most people. If you drink coffee at 2 p.m. with 100 milligrams of caffeine, at 8 p.m. you still have about 50 milligrams in your system. At 2 a.m., about 25 milligrams. It lingers, blocking. This is why caffeine in the afternoon can disrupt your sleep that night. You might feel tired enough to fall asleep. Adenosine is built up enough to overcome some of the blockade, but the sleep won't be as deep or as restorative. The architecture is disrupted. And here's something important. Caffeine does not actually give you energy. It just masks tiredness. The exhaustion is still there. You are still burning through your body's resources. You still need rest. Caffeine just hides the signals that would normally tell you this. It's like covering the oil light on your car's dashboard. The fact that you can't see the warning doesn't mean your engine isn't running low on oil. This is fine for short-term use. A cup of coffee to get through a morning after a poor night's sleep, no problem. Your body can handle it. But long-term, chronic use to mask chronic sleep deprivation, that's different. That has consequences. Your brain notices that its adenosine receptors are constantly blocked, so it adapts. It grows more receptors. If 10,000 receptors keep getting blocked, the brain will produce 12,000 receptors, then 15,000. This is called upregulation, and it means you need more caffeine to get the same effect. Someone who's never had caffeine might feel wired after 100 milligrams. Someone who drinks 3 cups a day might need 300 milligrams to feel normal. This is tolerance. It develops with most drugs that affect the brain. It's not unique to caffeine. And it comes with a partner, dependence. If you regularly consume caffeine and then stop suddenly, you feel terrible. Headaches, fatigue, irritability, difficulty concentrating, sometimes even flu-like symptoms. Why? Because your brain has upregulated those adenosine receptors. When caffeine suddenly isn't there to block them anymore, adenosine floods in and activates all of them at once. You feel overwhelmingly tired, worse than if you'd never had caffeine at all. These are withdrawal symptoms. They usually peak around 24-48 hours after your last dose, then gradually subside over a week or so. This is why many people say, "I can't function without my morning coffee." They literally cannot because coffee is giving them energy, but because their brain has adapted to its constant presence. Without it, they're in withdrawal. The solution, if you want to reset your tolerance, is to taper down slowly or go through a few unpleasant days of withdrawal. After a week or two caffeine-free, your brain down-regulates those extra receptors. You return to baseline. Then, if you start consuming caffeine again, you'll feel its effects more strongly. The magic returns. But many people never reset. They maintain a constant level of caffeine consumption for years, even decades. They're not getting the boost anymore. They're just maintaining normalcy, avoiding withdrawal. Not everyone responds to caffeine the same way. You might have noticed this. Some people can drink espresso at 10 p.m. and sleep like babies. Others have a cup of tea at lunch and lie awake until 3 a.m. Genetics explain much of this variation. There's a gene that codes for an enzyme that breaks down caffeine in your liver. Different versions of this gene work at different speeds. If you have the fast version, you metabolize caffeine quickly. It clears from your system in 3 to 4 hours. You can drink coffee in the evening without sleep issues. You're less sensitive to caffeine's effects. If you have the slow version, caffeine lingers in your system for 8 to 10 hours or more. You are more sensitive. An afternoon coffee might ruin your night's sleep. About half of people have the fast version. About half have the slow version. This is genetic lottery.
There are other genes involved too. Some affect how many adenosine receptors you have. Some affect how strongly those receptors bind to caffeine versus adenosine. Some affect other pathways that caffeine influences. The result is caffeine response is highly individual. This matters when you read studies about caffeine's health effects. A study might find that people who drink 4 cups of coffee daily have better cardiovascular health. But maybe that's because people with the fast CYP1A2 gene naturally drink more coffee since they do not get jittery and also happen to process caffeine in a way that doesn't stress their hearts. The same amount might be unhealthy for slow metabolizers. This is why blanket recommendations about caffeine are difficult. What's fine for you might be too much for your friend, or vice versa. Know yourself. Pay attention to how your body responds. That's better than any general guideline. Let's jump forward to 1987. An Austrian entrepreneur named Dietrich Mateschitz is traveling in Thailand for business. Jet-lagged and exhausted, he tries a local drink called Krating Dang, red water buffalo, a sweet, caffeinated tonic popular with Thai truck drivers and laborers. It works. His fatigue lifts. His mind clears. He sees an opportunity. He partners with the drink's creator, tweaks the formula for Western tastes, carbonates it, and introduces it to Europe with a new name, Red Bull. Red Bull gives you wings, the ads promise. It's an immediate hit. Not with everyone. Many people find it too sweet, too medicinal, strange tasting, but with a specific demographic, young people. Clubbers, students pulling all-nighters, extreme sports enthusiasts, anyone needing a quick, powerful jolt of energy. Red Bull contains about 80 milligrams of caffeine per can, equivalent to a cup of coffee. But it also contains taurine, an amino acid, B vitamins, and a lot of sugar or artificial sweeteners in the sugar-free version. The combination feels different from coffee, more intense, more immediate. And, crucially, it's marketed differently, not as a beverage for slow mornings in contemplation, but as fuel for performance, for pushing limits, for doing the impossible. This opens the floodgates. Monster, Rockstar, Amp, Full Throttle, dozens of energy drink brands appear. They compete on caffeine content, with some containing 160, 200, even 300 milligrams per can. The cans are large, colorful, aggressive-looking. They're sold in convenience stores, gyms, gas stations. They're associated with extreme sports, gaming, partying, staying up all night. Public health officials grow concerned. Stories emerge of young people hospitalized after drinking multiple energy drinks. Deaths are reported, rare but alarming. In some cases, people with undiagnosed heart conditions. In others, dangerous combinations with alcohol or other drugs. Some countries ban or restrict energy drinks, others require warning labels. The debate continues about whether these are safe products being unfairly stigmatized or genuinely dangerous substances that shouldn't be as freely available. The truth, as usual, is nuanced. For most healthy adults, the caffeine in energy drinks is not dangerous. But the combination of high caffeine, high sugar, aggressive marketing to young people, and the tendency to consume multiple cans quickly, this creates risks, especially for children and adolescents whose brains are still developing and who are more vulnerable to both caffeine's effects and to risky behavior. While energy drinks are surging in popularity, something else is happening in coffee culture. It is the 1990s and early 2000s. Starbucks has expanded from a single store in Seattle to a global empire. Coffee is everywhere, but much of it is mediocre, burned, over-extracted, masked with sugar and flavored syrups. A small group of coffee enthusiasts want something different. They want to treat coffee like wine, paying attention to origin, processing, roasting technique, brewing method. They want to taste the coffee itself, not just the caffeine hit. This movement is called third wave coffee. The first wave was mass-market commercial coffee like Folgers. The second wave was the coffee shop culture epitomized by Starbucks. The third wave is artisanal, specialized, focused on quality.
Third-wave shops source beans directly from farms, often paying premium prices. They specify not just the country of origin, but the specific farm, the elevation, the varietal of coffee plant, the processing method. They roast the beans lighter than traditional American roasts to preserve the beans' inherent flavors: fruity, floral, chocolatey, nutty, complex. They train baristas in precise brewing techniques. Water temperature matters, grind size matters, extraction time matters. The same beans can taste completely different depending on how they're prepared. And they charge accordingly. A single cup might cost $5 or $6, sometimes more. This seems absurd to many people. Coffee's just coffee, right? Caffeine is caffeine. But to third-wave enthusiasts, that's missing the point entirely. They're not just seeking caffeine, they're seeking experience, craft, beauty in the cup. It's a return, in some ways, to older traditions, the Japanese tea ceremony's attention to detail, the Arabian coffee ritual's emphasis on preparation as a meaningful act. And it's spreading. Third-wave shops exist in every major city now. Home brewing has become more sophisticated. People own precision grinders, gooseneck kettles, pour-over devices, machines that cost thousands of dollars. Coffee competitions exist. The World Barista Championship, where competitors are judged on their espresso technique, latte art, and the signature drinks they create. Coffee has become not just a commodity, but a culture, an identity, a way of engaging with the world.
But we should acknowledge, not all of this is healthy. In South Korea and Japan, there's a phenomenon called energy drink addiction. Young people, especially students and workers facing brutal academic and professional pressure, consume multiple energy drinks daily. Some drink 5, 6, 7 cans a day. The caffeine intake is enormous. The health effects accumulate: insomnia, anxiety, heart palpitations, digestive problems. In American universities, caffeine pills are popular study aids. Students take 200, 400, 600 milligrams of caffeine to pull all-nighters before exams. Combine that with prescription stimulants that some students abuse, and you have a recipe for dangerous cardiovascular stress. Some people develop genuine caffeine dependence. They cannot function without it. They arrange their entire day around caffeine consumption. They panic if they can't get their fix. Workplace culture often encourages this. Coffee is free in offices, working long hours is praised. Hustle culture glorifies exhaustion, frames sleep as weakness, celebrates staying up late and waking up early. And caffeine is the fuel for all of this. It allows people to override their body's signals, to work when they should be resting, to maintain a pace that isn't sustainable. Then there's the environmental cost. Coffee and tea require vast amounts of land. Forests are cleared for plantations. Water is used for processing. Plastic pods and disposable cups generate waste. The full life cycle of your daily coffee, from farm to cup to landfill, has a carbon footprint, uses water, involves transportation across continents. None of this means you should feel guilty about your morning coffee, but it's worth being aware, worth asking, is fair trade or direct trade better? Should I use a reusable cup? Do I actually need this much caffeine, or am I trapped in a cycle of dependence? These are questions without easy answers, but they are worth asking.